Carnival Corporation Cruise Line now requiring testing at the point of embarkation. Your cruise day ritual has just changed. Not only do you got to make sure you got your passport and your suitcase, but you're going to get your nose swabbed at the point of embarkation. Man, we got a lot to talk about on today's show. We're going to talk about that story. We're going to talk about what's going on in the Port of Tampa. We're going to talk about Norway. How about that? We'll talk about Norway and sadly another cruise line gone bankrupt. All that and more in today's episode. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Tony. If you enjoy that cruising and travel content, please consider subscribing with the notification bell on. So yeah, testing is going to be the theme today. We're going to talk MSC testing. We're going to talk about Carnival Corporation testing, and it's happening toot sweet. Pretty quick. It's happening right now. But first, let's take a spin around the cruise news, give you some updates, and we're going to start off with another cruise line bankruptcy story. Again, I think it's questionable to call some of these things cruise lines, but that's how they're labeled in the media. And so let's talk about this poor little American cruise line. The company is called Blount Small Ship Adventures. It's a fleet of 3 cruise ships, and they do expedition-type cruisings around Rhode Island. They got the coolest tagline, Blount Small Ship Adventures, going where the big cruise ships cannot go. Well, not to be too crass, but hopefully the big cruise lines aren't going into bankruptcy, Blount. I'm just saying, that seems shady. I feel bad that these people are going out of business. Fortunately, it's a family-owned business, and not only do they own these 3 ships that do cruising, but they also have a boatyard. The boatyard seems to be doing okay, but because of the challenges with the current health situation, the cruise line part of it is going away. Like I said, they do have 3 cruise ships, the Grand Caribe, the Grand Mariner, built in 1987 and 1988, respectively. They both hold 88 passengers, and they also have the Niagara Prince that was built in 1994, holding 84 guests. These cruise ships are for sale, so if you got any extra money sitting around, you need a little 88 passenger cruise ship, you can write a check for that. But the Blount family, they're going to continue with their shipyard business. They just got awarded a new contract, and so they're doing good on that side. Blount Small Ship Adventures, unfortunately, we hardly knew you, but now that we do know you, I can say honestly, you will be missed. Let's quickly talk about the Port of Tampa and the CEO for the Port of Tampa. His name is Paul Anderson. He was asked last week, when do you think cruising will resume? And he gave the answer that so many of us are giving. I don't know. I don't know when cruising will resume, but I think it could be in the spring of 2021. We're losing money over here at the Port of Tampa all this year, but I do think cruising will be back in spring of 2021. He did not back that up with any solid information other than, I don't know. I think that's when it's going to happen. Of course, this article is making the rounds through all of the media. Got people hitting you up from side to side saying, did you hear the Port of Tampa say they're not going to open to... Just read the articles. You'll find the quote where he says, we hope it could be sooner, but it could be later. We don't know. It's all depending on when cruising resumes, and he doesn't have the ability to say when cruising will resume. I'm putting this one in more as a public service announcement because a lot of people see the headlines, Tampa will not reopen until April, and then they blow up the social media like Tampa's not going to open. Read the article. You know, this guy basically says, we don't know. Who knows? Maybe spring. We hope. Could be sooner. Possible. So yeah, that's what you're working with there. So don't hang your hat too heavily on the Port of Tampa story. Now let's talk about cruising in Norway. It's been about 3 weeks since the Hurtigruten episode. You'll remember it. They went cruising. People got the virus on the cruise ship. They didn't necessarily follow the protocols that they had set up themselves. They let people go back to where they lived. All in all, about 71 people infected because of this Hurtigruten cruise. And the Norwegian government stepped in and put heavier restrictions on coastal cruising because of this event. These new rules are in effect at the minimum until November the 1st. Coastal cruising is a big deal in Norway, not only for leisure travel, but just to get from one place to another. That can continue, but vessels will only be allowed to cruise at 50% capacity and at a maximum capacity of 200 passengers. It was less restrictive before the Hurtigruten incident, and so there still continues to be fallout for that. There's a government inquiry into what happened on that cruise. Hurtigruten's retained additional counsel, basically hitting the fan over there in Norway when it comes to this cruise line. So no surprise if the resumed cruising does not happen well, or if there's a large failure in the protocol, or somebody ignoring the protocol, then there's going to be trouble. And so let's learn from that. And one company that I do feel like has probably learned from the example in Norway is MSC, who for the most part has had a successful restart of cruising there in Italy. And one of the biggest feathers in their cap is their decision to test passengers prior to embarkation, at the point of embarkation, not allowing for any kind of time gap between when they provide a negative test and when they get on the cruise ship. They're stopping you right at the embarkation point, and they're giving antigen tests. Okay, before we jump into the testing stories, let's talk about the 3 tests that are widespread right now. Antibody test is usually given to determine whether somebody has had the virus. It requires the body to have fought the virus and produced antibodies. That's what they're looking for there. An antigen test is looking for certain proteins that are indicators that the virus exists in the system. This virus has an interesting signature where there are these spiky proteins that connect to other cells. The antigen test is looking for that. And then a PCR test is looking for DNA. It's looking for genetic material. They've sequenced the DNA of the virus, and this PCR test is looking for that sequence of DNA to indicate the presence of the virus. The challenge with all 3 of these tests is that everything's based on timing. The life cycle of the virus, how it's working inside of the host, will determine when these 3 things show up. And so none of these tests are 100% accurate. That's why you see the cruise lines using the testing and the other protocols kind of holistically as a holistic approach to safety on the cruise ship. Not just one protocol and done, but a series of protocols for a holistic approach to safer cruising. MSC working it out in Italy. They went on a cruise last week on the MSC Grandiosa. They came back and they were going out on another cruise, and they got somebody on the next embarkation day before the cruise could go again. Someone tested positive for the virus. That person and 15 other members of his party denied boarding on the next cruise on the Grandiosa. So taking it super seriously there. But I know it makes you scratch your head. Didn't the dude that tested positive probably come in contact with a lot of people in the port? You know, they've got the social distancing there. They've got the masking policy. Again, all mitigations to wrap around the testing protocol. We'll see whether or not that means anything else, but they were denied boarding. Another interesting thing that MSC is doing is that anybody that leaves Italy and goes to a foreign country, they have to be tested before returning to the country, and MSC is providing those tests also. They made a port stop in Malta, which is not part of Italy, and anybody that got off the cruise ship in Malta, they were required to take a test and provide the negative test to the Italian government when returning. MSC will continue to run these cruises from Genova to Valletta in Malta, and so this testing process for people returning to Italy will continue to happen. And not surprisingly, we have the first Carnival Corporation cruise line that will be requiring testing at the embarkation point. Costa Cruise Lines will be restarting their cruise operations on September the 6th in Trieste, which is a port city there in Italy, and there will be a requirement that all passengers at embarkation will take a swab antigen test prior to getting on the cruise ship. Testing for Costa is going to work very similar to it the way it does for MSC. First, you get the antigen test, and then if you show up positive on the antigen test, they give you a PCR test. And then, of course, if you test positive on the PCR test, you're going to be denied boarding. I'm not sure what the circumstances if you test positive on one and negative on the other, but I'm assuming that testing positive on either one of those tests will probably result in you being denied boarding. I'm excited about what Costa and MSC are doing. There's no additional cost for the test, at least any straightforward cost. Obviously, you could see an increased cruise price in the future, maybe to accommodate for these extra costs, but at least it eliminates the idea of if you have to provide a negative test to the cruise line, it eliminates the idea that you take the test 4 days in advance or within 72 hours ago, then you travel to the cruise ship, exposing yourself to who knows what, and then getting on the cruise ship. I think this is a great move by the cruise lines, and I could see this translating into North American cruise cruising. If this holistic approach to the health protocols, including testing at the embarkation point, proves to be successful, I do believe we'll see that here in the ports in the United States. Question for the comments today: anybody against getting tested at the port? Do you think this is the right time to do the testing if testing is required? Let's continue the conversation below. Thanks so much for watching the show today. I hope you enjoyed it. Show your support by hitting the like button. My name's Tony for La Lido Loca, and until the next time, we'll see you on the Lido. Bye.